This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, Leah. I'm just going to do a quick mic check here. Hi, Leah. Are you able to hear me now? Or anybody?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, Leah. Are you able to hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you, Sarah. Can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to figure out how to get GoTo as a sidebar so that when I'm screen sharing, I can still see everyone. Kind of different for me all of a sudden today.
When I was gonna say, if you go to the top where you can see everyone, you might be able to
hmm
change your positions, but perfect timing to do upgrades.
I know.
Hello, Matthew.
Hello. I see everyone's got their cameras off. There we go. I'm getting feedback from someone there. Maybe it's myself. It's gone.
I was trying to share my camera, Matthew, and it's finally working.
Oh,
Oh, you're
joining on camera. There we go. Yeah, I apologize for missing the last meeting there. I was for the review of everything for this. I was having a belated 25th anniversary by 2 years. We were supposed to have it a couple years ago, but a certain pandemic seemed to have thrown a wrench into it. So our plans changed, and so we just got to take our trip.
oh nice. Your 25th, the wedding anniversary?
Yeah, well, it's 27 in August now, so 27 years.
Holy.
Yeah,
I did not know you were old enough to be married that long.
yeah, yep. Definitely old enough to be married that long, for sure. So I
Well,
hide my age.
congratulations.
What's that?
Congratulations, that's awesome.
Well, thank you very much. So this month I hit 51 years.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, 25 years, 27 years married. It's within the realm of reason, early 20s sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I'm sure everyone else isn't overly concerned.
Did you guys went on vacation or?
Yep, we went to Scotland.
Oh, wow, good for you.
Yes, it was somewhere we had hoped to go over the for, well, it's been decades we'd wanted to go, and we finally had the opportunity. So we took all reasonable precautions before going, took care of everything, isolation, and we kept our distances, proper uh, not respirators, but masking and hand washing and all the appropriate things. And when we
Awesome.
came home, we made sure we isolated just to make sure that we didn't bring something back. So,
Yeah, you
yeah.
never know, I guess.
No, you never know. So we thought we'd uh, confirm that, but we're good. But yes, I did get my notes in. So Lee has my slides and everything. It was just took a little bit to get some of the information there at the last minute, but
No worries. Yeah, Leah is just logging off and trying a different computer. Her go-to Teams isn't sharing properly, so we'll get
oh,
started here in 8 minutes, but
sounds
she's
good.
just working out some bugs.
Good enough. I'm just checking a few things on my end here. So I'll just mute, turn my camera off for a moment here.
Hi everyone, we'll get started in about a minute here. Just wait for a few more people to log on. Hi Helen.
Hi Sarah, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Oh, good. It's cold here today, but we had a beautiful day, one day so far. That's nice.
That's all you can ask for.
That's all you can ask for. How do you blur your background, Sarah? I'm looking for that.
It was when I turned my camera on, it gave me the option.
Just don't want you to see all the crap in the background.
All right, I've got the top of the hour here, so I'll kick things off. Thanks everybody for joining. So it is our 35th annual general meeting today. So we'll go through this relatively quickly in the first hour, and then we have a presentation in the second hour. Leah, if you can hear me, I'll just get you to click to the next slide there. So just a few opening remarks here. I'll just go over quickly some of the conducts of the meeting. I think over the past few years, we're pretty used to online meetings now, but just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to learn about the chat function. So just in your top left corner of the platform, the GoToMeeting. I did get a Michelle. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, everyone can hear me. Michelle, can Lucy or somebody can type back to her that maybe it's just her. Oh, we have Roberta who also can't hear either. I know you do have to look at what your speaker settings are to make sure that you have the right speaker setting. All right. So there is the chat function. Looks like most people know how to use it. Just check your speaker settings and hopefully you'll be able to get that figured out. So only active members, ROH, ROHT are entitled to submit questions and vote at the meeting. We're going to use the consensus decision making for our voting. If we do have a huge technical malfunction, we may have a recess or something like that. And the chat function I'm seeing is at the top right. I may have said top left, I guess, but sorry about that. Mine is also on the right. I just don't know my lefts and rights. And we will be recording the meeting, so if you guys do have technical difficulties, we can send you guys the link to the meeting afterwards. We'll just go to the next slide, please, Leah. All right, so the agenda for today, we'll just go through a quick approval of the agenda as well as the approval of the minutes for the 2021 AGM. We have our presidents, vice presidents, treasurer, as well as the registrar's report. And then we'll move into our committee reports, our awards, new business. And then again, after the meeting's adjourned in the first hour, we'll go on to our presentation. And we'll have a members discussion as well, if you guys have questions or concerns. All right, next slide, please. All right, so the motion to approve the agenda, can I just get someone to give a motion to approve the agenda, please?
Lucie Marcotte, I approve the motion.
All right, and a second. I did see Mark, your hand up there. Can you second?
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
seconding.
All right, and next slide, please. All right, and the motion to approve the 2021 meeting minutes. So these did go out with the invitation to the AGM for this year. So can someone please motion to approve the 2021 minutes?
Alex Mercer, I'll approve.
Thank you. And then can I get somebody to second, please?
Matthew
I
Brewer.
do.
Oh,
Thank you, Matthew. All right, and we'll just go to the next slide for the president's report. All right, so here is our 2021-2022 Board of Directors. So you can see we have a couple people from the Western provinces, myself as the ROHT from the Western. We have Lucy and Mark representing our Quebec area, Matthew for our ROHT Eastern, our two Ontario representatives, Letty and Suzanne, and Roberto from the Atlantic provinces, and then Helen, our registrar. And speaking of our registrar, we have a whole new slide since we have a whole new person. So we just wanted to make sure everybody was aware. We did send it out in the newsletter, but Helen Mercereau is our new registrar as of January 2022 this year. So welcome to Helen, and a huge thank you to Liz. I'm sure many of you guys had conversations with her in the last many years, but she was our registrar for the past 8 years on the board. So thank you, Helen, for taking on the position, and a big thank you to Liz for all of the work she did for the last 8 years. All right, so just a few key accomplishments over the past year that we've done. We will kind of go into further detail about these in our committee reports and other reports, so I won't go into too much detail, but we did update our ROHT eligibility requirements. We launched an online submission process for the registration maintenance worksheet. So if you guys didn't submit this year, you'll become familiar with it in the coming years. We also did a spruce up on our OH exam handbook. We have had lots of continued updates to the CRBOH website. We published our occupational hygiene salary survey, which you guys should have received a few days ago. And then we've also been digitizing our record keeping. So it's been an ongoing story, but we had a storage unit previously with records, which we no longer have. So that was a huge accomplishment for us. And we'll just go to the next slide, please. And then just a quick briefing on some of our upcoming projects. So we do have a new committee called Future of the Profession. So they're just going to be working on completing a white paper, which we'll go into further details. And then we're just continuing our key approach with our partners. So the Breathe Freely campaign, our universities, our professional associations, and all of that. And then we're also looking at developing a secure online platform for our multiple choice exam. So hopefully that will be a key accomplishment for next year anyways. All right, next slide. All right, and I will introduce Lucy Marcotte here, and she will go through the Vice President's report.
Thank you, Sarah. So, in fact, there's no many things in the main role of the Vice President is to keep up to date the policy and procedures manual. So this year, the main one, the only one main change was the modification about the eligibility for the ROHT membership. So the idea was to include people who were having a baccalaureate degree from a university or a master degree to be able to have the ROHT title. And because some of people prefer to first go through the ROHT and then try to go to the ROH after. So to both how would we call that? The sorry, the membership are quite valuable on the work market. So that was the main changes that was done for that. So I think it's the only slides for that part of the Vice President report. Yeah. So it's now the time for Alex Mercer to talk about the Treasury.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. So some highlights from this past year, 2021. So we did continue to see revenue over our budgeted amount from our job posting service that's on our website. And we were able to reinvest some of our GICs, which matured this year. We did host our second annual virtual AGM. It was very well attended, and obviously as it was virtual, there was no cost associated with that. And the big accomplishment for us is we launched our new membership platform online, which offered a significant amount of savings. In the summer, we did have plans to meet face-to-face this year, but due to COVID, we weren't able to make that happen. The positive coming out of this is it did significantly reduce our expenses. And partially due to that, we have an expected surplus this year at approximately 30K. Excuse me. And we did make a motion internally to use some of that surplus for the purpose of modernizing our website and upgrading some of our online systems. Next slide. So having a look at our financial position, we can look over the last 3 years and compare our assets. Can someone mute their microphone? I think someone's on, someone needs to mute. There's a lot of feedback. We have seen increases in our assets over the last 3 years, which is quite nice to see, and some of them have been quite significant. For our liabilities, we've been more or less stable, which is a good place to be at. Next slide, Leah. So if we break down some of our different revenue streams, again, over the last 3 years, we have seen steady increases over the years, which also is what we want to see. So that's been good to see. Next slide, Leah. So this figure comes from our most recent financial audit, and we're showing here the different streams of revenue and some of our expenses. And we're comparing here just the last 2 years, so 2020 to this current year, 2021. And if we can draw our attention to the bottom line, we have seen an increase over the last year in our assets and from the beginning of the year to the end, both of which are very encouraging trends for us. Next slide, Leah. And similarly, also from our financial audit, taking a look at our cash flow, both from our operating and investing activities. And again, we're seeing the trends we want to see. We have an increase from the beginning of the year to the end, and also an overall increase from the previous year. Next slide, Leah. So Crboh and Donald is the firm that audited our financial position, and they did this December 2021. And they were reviewed as a board. We feel that the statements were presented fairly, and all the operations, cash flow, and the audit itself was in accordance with Canadian standards. Next slide, Leah. So I'd like to put forward a motion to approve the audit, if someone could approve that.
Sarah McCurdy can.
Great, thank you, Sarah. And I'll just need a seconder for that.
Matthew Brewer, all second.
Thank you, Matthew. And next slide. And as they did a great job in 2021, I'd like to put forward a motion to appoint Crboh and Donald to conduct our 2022 audit. So I'll ask for someone to approve that motion.
Marc Barré, I approve.
Thank you very much.
And we
And
did have Kathy Roll raise her hand on the chat function as well.
okay, thank you. Thank you both. We can use as a second if that's appropriate. Great, thanks. And I'll pass it on to Helen.
Great, thanks very much. Yeah, so one of the big things I wanted to say first was thanks to Liz for all she knows, and a bit sad for me for how little I know, but I'm learning every day. Thank goodness for Leah. Anyway, so the registrar's report, it just summarizes our 5 exam types that we have. ROHT, which is multiple choice and essay, the NAR, which is the National Accreditation Recognition, ROH Fast Track 1, ROH Fast Track 2, and ROH, the total all in one. And it's still the majority of people, it's the ROH Fast Track 1 and 2 that tends to be the mode. Next, please. So this is just a summary of what our membership looks like across Canada. Next one, please. And we've got 66 ROHTs in 2021, and you can see the distribution. As always, it's Alberta and Ontario who are the most populous. The next slide, please. And the ROHs for 2021, a total of 257, with 7 partially retired, 19 international. And again, you can see in this case, it's Ontario at the head, followed by Alberta, and then British Columbia, and very few out in the east, but hopefully that'll improve sometime soon. Next, please. And this is just a summary of the total membership for the last 10 years or so. And you can see that the COVID years did have an impact. We had a lower number of both types, and then a lower total overall. And we haven't really recovered to the levels of the 2017, which would probably be the peak, and 2012. Next slide, please. And these are exam candidates. And if you look at the red bar is the ROHT, the orange is the ROH, and the NAR is the international sort of brownish color. And I've been told I am somewhat colorblind, so hopefully the colors match the words. Withdrawals is sort of a darker green, and then the total is the paler green, and then the pass is the aqua color. And again, you can see that our numbers were lower for 2020 and 2021. And I do see a bit more rebounding in 2022, but those numbers will be presented next year. Next slide, please. And we have new ROHT members from 2021. I'm not going to try and say all the names because I'm sure I'll get some wrong, but welcome to all of those. So there's 4 of them. Next slide, please. And then the new ROH members for 2021 are listed there. And Alex is on the top of the list. And the 2021 retirees are also listed there. Does anybody have any questions for me? No? Great. Thanks very much.
I did have a question here in the chat. Retirees are full-time retirements or partial?
In the numbers slides, they are a combination of both.
And the one announced over here, the tree.
They're again a combination. They're not specified into which category. I could find that out for you and report back, but right now it's just a combination reported. Partial seems to be the more common than full. Thank you for the question. Any other question? Okay, thank you.
Sarah, are you still there?
Yeah.
I am. So we're going to move on to the future of the profession report. So Marc-Andre, you are up.
Yeah, I'm trying to get that camera going. Does it go like this? Anyway, you don't need to see me. Okay, future of the profession report. So we're still working on the same mission statement as before. So the health and safety profession has evolved significantly in the last 2 decades. Everybody have felt that benefit and that pain. And today there are multiple initiatives across Canada and elsewhere in the world to redefine the roles and responsibility of various players in the field and potentially achieving professional recognition via title protection. And of course, let's not forget that who is a health professional? Well, it's everybody that faces risk, but like every worker, every manager, every supervisor should be aware of health and safety basic, but in some circumstances, we need more specialized resources, and that's where professional recognition and title protection could come into play. So the mandate of the committee is to develop a strategy to ensure that occupational hygienists are recognized and heard in this debate. We feel like some profession take the debate like it is theirs. So we want to make sure that we're being heard in that debate. And the current level of workers, of course, in public health protection remains the same or is increased by any governmental initiative that is related to title protection. Okay, next. Lucky to be the first one. I have more time. And you guys did a good job before me. That was we must have saved 10 minutes. Can someone change the slide? Thank you. One of the specific problems facing the occupational health profession in the occupational health and safety field is we can see it. We have a decline in numbers. Our retirees are up, but good news, like we just discussed, some of them are staying partially, so that's going to help us down the road. Recruitment is kind of down, but in the last 2 years we seem to have a stabilization, so it's looking good. We have low recognition or identification or knowledge of our profession, and that's an issue for us. We need to where we want to be is to come back that attrition trend, having industrial and public recognition that in certain circumstances you should call an occupational hygienist to solve certain types of issues. Get the access to OH resources. So it happens, people do look for occupational health, but we're not that many, so we're hard to find. And mostly what we worked on this year is continue the collaboration with other professions, and specifically to the Alberta initiative and the CRSSP, CRSSP, yes, initiative. So where is the legislation going to go? We don't know yet. We're just kind of still at the philosophical debate discussion at this stage of the game. Yes, I'd like it to be more formal, but we're philosophizing a lot. Next slide, please. So partnership, okay, I talked about these two, the Alberta Society. So we are all constantly trying to define what does a hygienist offer in the health and safety, which it's obvious to us, but doesn't seem to be obvious to everybody else. And what is our specific code of practice? And with the BCRSP, we have regular meeting with them. It is a slow moving process. We have challenge regarding definitions and goals. Currently, my understanding of what's going on is that the safety profession would like to get protection of the health and safety management, which is, for me, it's not that obvious that it fits in the scope of definition of profession, but we're talking a lot about that, and try to get the focus down to what's the competencies that you need to achieve certain tasks. So I feel like the safety world is trying to get it all in one lump. CRSSP and a low place for occupational health. They don't forget us, but they don't give us a big place, but mostly one lump. They try to regulate everything all at once. And from my perspective, we'd like to have a more multidisciplinary approach. So comparison to the medical field or the law field is a bit treacherous because these are very defined in the educational process. As health and safety, it's a multidisciplinary approach. So I think we need to have some imagination of how we approach this situation specifically if we want to have a chance of success. But the legislator is clearly telling the CRSSP, we like to talk with you. We want you to help us achieve something, but you have to make sure that you respect all the professions that are involved in health and safety. So it's quite interesting, and I hope myself and Matthew Brewer brought a model and some discussion to the Halifax Safety Conference in 2022. The personal feedback that I got from the audience were quite positive about the approach of how to think about the issue. So, and I'll show you a few things about that in a second. If I could change the slide, please. First, I did my homework. Okay. I did my homework. I went back to the International Labor Organization because there's an history behind it and how did the ILO define the field of occupational health and safety. And what I found, they're pretty clear about their definition. They define the world of professional occupational health and safety as engineer, physician, hygienist, nurse. There's room for other things, but it's all kind of technical people, people with technical background, university, science, education, and higher. There's not that gap about managers of health and safety. With the evolution, there's got to be some place for that too. So we're trying to find a balance, but it is normal that us, the hygienists, we come in to the debate with that point of view. Yes. Next slide, please. And of course, the American Industrial Hygiene rebranding last year. So they bring it occupational health and safety science profession because it's playing a bit back against us that we are occupational health. We're not just occupational health. We do safety things when the problem gets technical. Chemical clothing are example of where we intervene in the safety field. So it's important. This helps us bring it the health and safety terminology into our profession of occupational health. So that's on the table too in terms of discussion how we see ourselves. Next slide, please. I think it's the last one that I have. Sorry for abusing my colleagues. Of course, we have a clear set of competencies, so that helps us to define where we are. So there's some places, and the AIHA clearly define what's a technician, what's a practitioner, what is a professional. So there's a difference. Maybe you know the regulation and you can manage a respiratory protection program, but you still need a professional to give you what are the exposure scenarios are possible and what's the correct PPE for that job. When you said that, then somebody can pick it up and manage it, but it's not defined in the core competency, that management part. So that's important to have that distinction too. Next slide, please. That's really the last one. So what I'm trying to get the debate on, since it's a multidisciplinary approach, I found a model from a professor Professor Malcher from Belgium, and he had that good philosophy that everybody's involved in health and safety, but not at the same level. And what I'm trying to do is to build this model. So at the bottom, you have all workers, supervisor, product manager, and these are responsible for all health and safety situation. But in certain cases, they'll need an interpretation of the regulation. So they'll go to a generalist. And then you need to have special risk assessment because it's a high hazard. Then you'll go to a specialist, and then you have the university expert. And what is important is to have a communication that goes both ways, right? So the problem could come from the bottom. We have an issue; it smells bad, right? Or it could come from the top, nanoparticulates. We're gonna have to start dealing with this, but it goes down the line, up the line, and we need to build that thing. So having one box, one person that covers all this role is kind of utopic. Of course, the decision making is down below. If nobody listens to it, the expert, you're not going to achieve a change. So we need to understand and respect that. And on the left, of course, the sophistication and the cost of expertise goes, but there's less problem that needs lots of expertise and lots of problems that need generalists. So when we could take this and look at each topic, respiratory protection, confined space entry, and see, well, the safety people, at what level are you in that for that topic, and the occupational hygienist, where is he on that scale from that topic? And I think at this point we're starting the discussion on this base, and it seemed constructive. So that's where we are. So just a closing note, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. And also you can reach to us if you are interested by the future of our profession and you'd like to participate with us in building a stronger profession and continue support the health and safety protection of the public and the workplace. Well, please join us on our committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marc. All right, just before we jump into external affairs, it was brought to my attention I missed a few wordings on our motion. So we did have the motion for the approved minutes and the approved agenda. So for the approved agenda, is there anybody opposed to the motion that was carried or that was put forward? All right, anybody opposed to the motion for the approval of the meeting minutes from the 2021 AGM? And is there anyone opposed to the motion for the auditor for next year? All right, it sounds like we're all in favor and motions are carried. So sorry about that. We'll move on to our external affairs report. So Lucy, you are up again.
Yes. So the vice president also normally deals with the external affair. So this year, the NARC Sheen renewal of the CRBOH was ended by this June 2022. So efforts were done to fill out the renewal form. So it's ongoing. I assume that I don't expect any problem regarding that. We didn't have any major changes, so it should go through. Um, we have for those who are interested with the Iowa activities, we have a new committee chair that was named in December 2021. It's Kelly Fernandez. She's representing the BGC, and actually she's working in Canada, in Toronto, I think. I'm not sure of that, but she's in Canada located. So that's interesting, and it has something to do with our challenges, having our colleague CIH joining the CRBOH membership. So she's going to get into official work chair this year, current this year. Also, we have our ongoing initiative. Last year, we were announcing that there was the Breed Freely initiative. That is the Canadian version of the BOHS platform. It's still Jason McInnes that is managing this project, and work is still ongoing, but not as rapidly as he thought initially. But it's volunteering, so but things are still going on. So you should be able to hear about that program soon enough. Next slide, please. And as mentioned by Marc-André, I won't go through all that, but for sure, we are still making effort to having ongoing discussion with the BCRSP as well as the ASHSP as well, and of course, other local organizations like provincial ones. So I think that's it for the external affairs.
Thanks, Lucy. Letty is up with our Communications and Promotions Committee report.
Thank you, Sarah. Hope everyone can hear me well. So hello, everyone. My name is Letty, and I am one of your Ontario directors and also the chair of the Communications Promotion and Awards Committee. In the past year, we've published 3 newsletters under the brand new format, which we have received very positive feedback on. This year, for the newsletter, we also introduced a few regular columns, such as the leadership series, regular book reviews, tools of the trade, and profiles, which profiles a different ROH or ROHT in each of our newsletters. We've also developed some guidelines and continue to update our LinkedIn page. Can you do the next slide? Thanks. Also, I want to take this time to remind our membership that we do have certificate frames as well as stamps and embossers for sale via our website. Next one. And I would also like to recognize our newsletter committee here, including our editor, our article contributors, and also our translators. And they're all key to a successful newsletter every time we publish our newsletter. Next slide. And lastly, I want to thank our core promotions, communications, and awards committee. Great, thank you. And that's the update for this.
All right, so the ROHT exam committee report. So in absence of Suzanne, I will go through this for her. So again, some of the notable activities. So the ROH exam committee did go through the examination handbook and did some recent updates to it. So it is available online if anyone wants to go through it or use it as a resource for other people. We did adopt 2 exam sittings per year, so we now have our spring and fall exams. And again, lots of COVID-19 considerations for the exams, writing policies last minute and all of that. So that definitely kept Suzanne very busy. Next slide, please. All right, and so the 2021-2022 committee members, so as you can see there on the left of the slide, we have lots of volunteers there, and we did have 10 different locations for the 2 exams that were written in 2021. Next slide. All right, and for the oral examiners, we do have our 3 chief oral examiners, Andrea, Lydia, Guillaume, and then lots of panel members that are part of the oral examination process as well. So they do have volunteers throughout the country. Next slide, please. The ROHT exam committee report. So Dave Gerald is the chair of this committee, and then Suzanne is the liaison. Lots of volunteers that help Dave out as well. It is an independent, separate from the ROH exam. We have a volunteer that manages our database, and then they also prepare the exams and send them to the proctors. There is a call out for new committee members and new questions for our database as well. So if you guys are interested in that, you'll be able to reach out. I think we have a link in the end of the slide here for volunteers once we send out the survey. And then we did translate all of our ROHT exam question database into French as well. So now it's easily available for our French candidates. And then again, special thanks to the proctors for the ROHT exams, and we did have 3 separate locations this past year as well. Next slide. All right, and now we're gonna move on to Matthew Brewer for the registration maintenance points.
Thank you, Sarah. So as Sarah mentioned, my name is Matthew Brewer. I'm the ROHT Director for Eastern, which includes Ontario through Newfoundland. I'm also the Registration Maintenance and Points Committee Liaison for the board. So as you may recall from last year, we merged the points and maintenance committees into one. And actually, we'll go to the next slide if we may. And as you can see, we launched, for those of you who submitted your points for activities this year, you may have noted that we're doing it a little differently. Starting last fall, we moved our registration maintenance to an online format to make the upkeep and the submission of the forms easier for the users and for the reviewers on the other end. So while we as the designation holders have had to check the master inventory list that was provided on the website in the past, the points are now currently under review by the committee and the board. So we're working on some of the updating the maintenance guides as well. The maintenance guides were for the old system. Now that we're coming into a new system, we have to review those things, make sure that it's clear and concise and easy for everyone to understand so that we can effectively get our information entered into the system effectively. Next slide, we may. So we're to that end, it has been effective. Currently, we've had 89% of the ROH's worksheets entered in for this calendar year for the 2021. And as you'll see in the next one, which we're not going to go to yet, we have had 75% of the ROHT worksheets that were submitted for review. You'll note on here that it shows that none were successful and none are under audit. The reason for that is, as with any major shift over to new technologies, there's been some hiccups in the adoption of it. Your information that you've entered is in there. It did not go into the ether. It exists. The issue is with the reviewers on the other end being able to access it. It's pretty much been worked out, and so we should have the reviews of the submitted worksheets completed in the very near future here. So stay tuned. That is forthcoming. But that's why the information on the slide shows that there have been no successful or under review audit. All of them are listed under reviews pending. Note that there are a few on here for the worksheets not submitted, ROHs. There are 4 that have not been submitted. So if you're on the call, you should get on that. We have a wonderful new platform that you can use. And our wonderful volunteers here that you can see on the side. We have Graham, Angie, Mike, Jerry, and Krista. They are eager and willing to review your information to get you going for the next year. Next slide, please. As you can see with the ROHTs, there's myself, there's Kathy and Jody who are reviewing. We've had 12 due for this year. We've had 9 come in, so 75%. So if you're one of the 3 ROHTs that are due, now would be a good time to get them in. So as you can note also at the bottom, it does mention that the points required did change a little bit, and we are reflecting the changes due to COVID, the challenges that existed previously in obtaining points. When you enter your information into the system, it will account for that when you put your information in. So put in whatever you can. We'll be reviewing it. And that's where we are with the registration maintenance and the points. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matthew. All right, Letty's up again.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. All right, awards. Thank you. So every year, the CRBOH will award one $500 scholarship along with free examination fees to a successful applicant from a college or university program relating to occupational hygiene, chemistry, environmental science, or health and safety. The applicants are evaluated by the awards committee, and this year's chosen winner for the student award is Pratik Ashok Singh, and he's from UBC. And last year, the CRBOH introduced a new award, the Andrea Satz-Korczak Lifetime Achievement Award, in honor of Andrea's extensive and excellent contributions to the profession of occupational hygiene at a provincial, national, and international level. And of course, the inaugural award was given to Andrea at last year's AGM. This year, the award was based on a nomination process, and it's to be presented to an individual in recognition of extraordinary lifetime achievement in the field of occupational hygiene. And we are pleased to announce that this year, the award goes to Mark Cousineau. I will now call upon John Lee from the Ministry of Labour in Ontario, from the Ministry of Labour, Training and Skills Development, to say a few words to honor Mark. John,
Hi.
are you on?
Yes.
Great.
Hi. All hear me? Great. Thanks a lot, Letty. Great. Well, thank you very much, Letty, and thank you to everybody at CRBOH. It's such a great honor. Mark, as I'm sure you all know, was the former provincial hygienist, and he was a really exceptional individual and exceptional hygienist. He was extremely proud of his work as a hygienist and of his membership with CRBOH and his credentials with his ROH. And I'm sure that he would be very happy to receive the award. he has such a long list of achievements, but maybe I just wanted to highlight a couple of quick ones during his time as provincial hygienist. One of which being in the past, there was uh, the exemption of Regulation 833 to construction projects, which from a regulatory perspective, that was a really significant achievement under his watch. Also, the more recent updates to Regulation 833 and 490 with designated substances and control of exposure to biological or chemical agents, where I'm sure all of you know there's a lot of additional enhancements with regards to respiratory protection and also in terms of air testing, where there's some wording now that did not exist there previously about how the air testing would need to be performed by or under the supervision of somebody with industrial hygiene practice. So I think that was a really significant achievement to get that kind of wording into our legislation. And I think is really something as part of Mark's legacy that will last for a long, long time and hopefully continue the good hard work that we want to increase the profile of hygienists across the country. Mark was extremely dedicated, even up until the last few weeks while he was at the hospital. He was still sending out emails, and he was very generous with his time. So thank you very much to everybody. We're very grateful, and I think Mark is extremely deserving of this. I'm sure his family is going to be very proud, and we're going to be very excited to let them know about him being the recipient of this reward. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John, for honoring Mark.
Thank you so much, John. That was very, very nice. All right, on to our other business. So new and outgoing directors. Just go to the next slide there. So our incoming president. So I'm very honored to announce, that Lucy is our next president. So congratulations, Lucy. I'm passing you the baton. You can take it now. So Lucy has been with the board since June 2019, so she knows all of the ins and outs, and she's our Quebec representative for ROH. And again, like you guys heard throughout the presentation, she's involved with the NAR committee in Iowa and very active on the External Affairs Committee as well. So with that being said, I will hand it over to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Sarah. So it's a bit with excitement, but also a bit of nervosity that I'm taking this position. First of all, because I think there is a lot of big challenge to come. So I think I hope we're going to be able to have some at least one face-to-face meeting this year, coming year, because we're much more productive by being together and to be able to get through new program and not new program but special project. And one of our main one will be the modernization of the exam process. I hope we're going to be able to make a little go a bit further in this project, and also in accordance with the future of the profession. I think I would like to find good way to increase the number, in fact to invert the tendency that we have right now, so I get more new ROH and ROHT than we get that go to retirement, so to increase our troop. So it's my pleasure to introduce my new colleague from the Quebec, Kiet Nguyen. I haven't seen him in the assistants today. I'm not sure he's there, but I'm really happy to welcome him. So it's going to be really pleasant to work with him. So he's actually working for the Société des Transports de Montréal, and he make his master degree in health and safety engineering at the l'École Technologie Supérieure, and he's member of the. He was actually, that's an interesting fact, that he was the award student, the recipient of the CRBOH Student Award in 2017. So So maybe it could be so inspiring for a new recipient of the student award. So next slide, please. So we did also have new, or in fact, returning director from for another term. So I'm really happy to have Matthew Brewer and Roberto Sgrosso back with us for a next term. So they're both representing the Atlantics province and the Eastern for the RHT. Next slide, please. And we didn't convince Marc-André to present himself for the next term. So thank you very much, Marc-André, for all your work in the board. I know we are going to be able to get you in some of our committee, like the future of the profession. I'm quite sure that you are interested in. And thank you again for your in tes discours vraiment convaincants. So for that, for being with us. So always great to have a chat with you. Next slide, please. So is there any question to one of our presenter or a subject that people would like to raise? I would ask you to have it to write it in the chat. We'll let you a few minutes, a few seconds. So I don't see any activities. So hopefully it's because we were quite clear this year. For sure, if you have any question that just pump up later on, please do not hesitate to contact us through our email to Leah, to our secretariat. So we're going to be happy to answer you. I would like also to bring your attention that there are going to be a survey. Is it a survey that we say? Yeah. So a survey regarding your appreciation of the AGM this year. So let's have a small break to allow our presenter, Jérôme Lavoué, that is going to present and talk about the subject of the statistic in the industrial hygiene field. So let's come back. So it's 10 to 4. So let's come back at 4. Is that good for everybody or it's too long? What's the scheme, Sarah?
Yeah, that's fine. We can adjourn till 4, but we just need to close off with our motion to adjourn.
Oh, yeah. So I need a motion to adjourn the CRB OH 35th Annual General Meeting.
Hi, it's Lydia. I'll do that.
Good. So we don't need any approval. So the motion is carrying out for this one. So
All right, so we'll just take a quick break here and then re-adjourn here in 8 minutes.
yeah, come back, everyone's. Jérôme, tu me laisseras quelques minutes pour essayer de t'introduire. Je ne sais pas si c'est moi qui va le faire ou si c'est Sarah. Sarah, are you the one who's gonna present Jérôme, or am I the one?
You are the one.
Okay.
Not that I don't want to, but you know.
Marc-André qui m'invite, mais c'est toi qui dois me présenter, c'est injuste.
Marc-André, il met tout dans ma cour. Non, c'est faux. C'est faux.
C'est un plan de transition.
Ouais, c'est ça.
C'est planifié comme ça.
Ouais. Et tu serais bon, par exemple, Marc-André, pour le faire.
Mais non, mais t'as dit oui, t'as dit que tu le ferais l'autre fois.
Ouais, je sais, mais là, ils m'ont enlevé mon petit
T'es
texte
bonne toi
en-
aussi pour faire ça.
Mhm. Ben, je connais Jérôme, ça a été mon prof. Fait que...
Chanceuse.
Oui,
Oui.
c'était intéressant. J'étais bonne dans son cours aussi, j'étais pas si pire. Je faisais pas partie des cancres.
Je me souviens
J'étais
plus.
j'étais pas la... En tout cas, j'ai réussi. Au moins, l'important, c'est pas d'être le cancre du groupe. C'est ça qui est important. So, hopefully everybody's back. I see that we still have almost all our attendees. That's a good news. So I think they all came to hear you, Jérôme. So so it's with a big pleasure that I introduce Jérôme Lavoué, which is a professor at the I'm aware of the French name of it, so I think it's l'École de santé publique de Montréal, which is the School of Health and Safety. Is that the good way to translate it?
School of Public Health.
Okay, School of Public Health, and he held a baccalaureate as in chemistry engineering, and he completed a master and a PhD in the health and safety field. And through the years, he made a lot of contribution to the science, and he's working with famous teams and a good of other worker. He did published in many good references, and his main topics is the statistic and how to which extent we can push this and how important he traumatized me because Jérôme Lavoué was has been my professor when I made my micro program in health and safety, and I remember myself coming out of his courses traumatized, saying, "Oh my God, how important is the statistical point of view of a single test in the health and safety field?" So it's with a big pleasure that I join you to hear the presentation of Jérôme Lavoué, which is called the Modern Industrial Hygiene Statistic.
Thank you very much, Lucy. I am very honored to have been invited to talk to this group. So thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really pleased. I hope I'll be able to interest you in my presentation. I find you all very courageous to attend anything with the word statistics in it at the end of the day. So I hope I can distract you a bit during this talk. Sorry, apologies for the title. It's not very creative, but not very important. So let's go right through the content. So the first two sections of this talk will be, reminding ourselves of some of the foundations of exposure assessment and some challenges associated with it. And then I'll talk about two topics that may be a bit new for some of you. I think they are fairly recent. In our field, the European approach to measuring compliance to occupational exposure limits and the advent of Bayesian statistics in our field is a little less than a decade old. So to start at the beginning, I think in 2001, I heard a sentence from an industrial hygienist in a conference. I think is a reflection of the essence of exposure variability in the workplace. As you can read, never measure a second time because you will find something different. I think it's really captures the essence of what we face, the challenge we face, that when we go spend a day with the workers and measure their exposure, if we come back the next day, it might be very, very different and just as important to know. As an illustration, this is an actual exposure data set for a single worker working in the battery manufacturing industry in the 80s. So it's a bit of an old data set, but still useful. So you see 23 different days of exposure to lead for this worker, and you can see that most of his exposure values were in a ratio of 4 to 5-fold, so between 10 and 40, but some values were even lower, some other values were even above 50. So, this order of magnitude between lower and higher values of exposure across time for people doing the same thing in the same place is really typical of exposures, and we need to take that into account when we try to assess whether exposures are low enough compared to the exposure limit. Thankfully, we have a model to help us interpret these values and characterize this variability. And this is why we are able to just take a small number of measurements and extrapolate them to the entire exposure profiles we wish to conclude about. So if we here I show, I think you can see this little red dot here on the top left of the screen. So this is an extension of the previous data set. It's actually almost 200 measurements on 6 workers, and it's a similar exposure group or homogeneous exposure group. So you see the sequential plot of these exposure levels. So it's a large data set. We could almost count it as a population. And if we draw a histogram of these values, we see this asymmetrical shape where we have the majority of the values within a band here between, let's say, 10 to 30 approximately. But then there's a number of values that not an insignificant number that's fairly high. And if we smooth the outline of this histogram, we get what we call a probability density curve. So that may sound like an impressive name, but you just look at it as you would look at a histogram, and the interpretation is fairly straightforward. The majority of the data is where the majority of the area under the curve is. And so if we smooth this histogram, we get this shape here. And this shape is a typical shape that we observe when we get a large number of measurement values. It's been seen in many data sets over decades. And it happens to be close to a mathematical equation that's the log normal distribution. And so we use the fact that this equation is a reasonable approximation of how exposures behave to help us in extrapolating some measurements to a larger population that is of interest to us. Because of course we don't want to conclude only on about the days we visited a company. We want to conclude about all the other days too, and that's why we need such a model. Okay, I see now I can't. Apologies for that. I'm getting used to this GoToMeeting system. And so what parameter of this log normal distribution do we use to to decide whether a situation is acceptable or not, whether we consider there is overexposure? Well, there is a large consensus, I would venture to say now, and you see on the right of the screen the icons and the logos of several organizations that share the same criteria to define what would be an acceptable or unacceptable situation. So, the basic tenet is that it's impossible to demonstrate that no exposure level is above the OEL, because we would have to measure every day, everyone. So the practical proposal is that to demonstrate that less than 5% of the exposure levels are above the OEL. And if we look at daily exposure, so for example, an 8-hour OEL, if we use this, so we are interested in days, I use this this little figure here where I represented the full year of exposure. So you see the weeks in the y-axis and the weeks in the x-axis and the month in the y-axis. So the square represents a full year, approximately 200 little squares. 1 square is 1 day. And well, less than 5% of the days above the OEL would be what you see here. So approximately, we would like to be less than 10 red squares. So days where the exposure is above the OEL. We want to have less than 10 of these red squares within our year. That's what we would consider the threshold between an acceptable situation and overexposure. So to represent that, to give a little more details about that, so we consider there is overexposure if the exceedance fraction is above 5%. So here, if I consider that my lead data set is an entire population, it would be almost a year of exposure for workers. I just put my sequence of data, I draw the OEL vertically, and then I just count what proportion of that of these values are above the OEL of 50 micrograms per cubic meters. And here I obtain an exceedance fraction of 3%. So this would be an acceptable situation since 3 is lower than 5. And if we look at the corresponding concept for using the probability density curve, where this is the distribution curve for the exposure levels, well, we just draw the OEL here at 50, and the exceedance fraction would be the shaded area on the right of the OEL, which is very small here and exactly 3%. So this is one way of defining overexposure using the exceedance fraction. There's an equivalent way that I think is maybe more frequently used in North America, is to use the notion of the 95th percentile. So the 95th percentile of an exposure distribution is a parameter from that distribution. It is the parameter that has 95% of the values below itself. So here the shaded area is 95% of all the values and only 5% above. And what we do is we compare this 95th percentile to the OEL, and we want it to be lower than the OEL, of course. Because you see, as you see here, if the 95th percentile is below the OEL, we are sure that there are less than 5% of the values above the OEL. So really comparing the 95th percentile to the OEL or comparing the exceedance fraction to 5% is really, two faces of the same coin. It will lead to exactly the same distributions, the same conclusions, sorry. And I put the AIHM monograph picture here because the AIHM monograph uses the 95th percentile a lot. The exceedance fraction is more frequently used in Europe. So we have our consensus overexposure criterion, which is we want less than 5% of the exposure levels above the OEL, or we want the 95th percentile to be lower than the OEL. One thing, though, is that I illustrated these two parameters, assuming we could measure most of the population. I had 200 lead measurements, but it is seldom the case, unfortunately. And we need to extrapolate a very small number of measurements to a larger target population. And, a similar sentence to the one about variability would be never estimate the 95th percentile a second time, because you would find a different value of the 95th percentile and may then draw a different conclusion. And to try to illustrate this concept here, what we are interested in is a large ensemble of exposure values. And, maybe typically what we want to manage is everything that happens within a year in a similar exposure group. So we are interested in this little figure. We're interested in knowing what is the exceedance in all these squares. Unfortunately, we only have money to measure a small numbers of these squares. So what we have is this here on the lower right part of the screen. And we use this small number of measurements to extrapolate to what we call what is our target population. And what we need to be aware of is that the exceedance fraction in my sample is not the exceedance fraction in the target population, just because of sampling uncertainty. It's like we ideally, and sometimes it's not even possible to do that perfectly, but ideally we draw squares in the target population quasi randomly. And then we want to extrapolate the result from our sample to the entire population, but this comes with uncertainty, and we need to manage that uncertainty and estimate it. It's fairly difficult. And so this is an illustration of that challenge, is that we have our own sample with its own maybe sample of 6 values. You know, the AIHA suggests 6 values, and we can calculate a geometric mean and a geometric standard deviation, which suggests a shape for an exposure distribution suggested by our sample. But the question is, what does it tell us about the true exposure distributions in the target population? And it's not easy to get the right idea about what is truly existent, the rest, when I'm not here to measure. And we'll see a bit later that Bayesian statistics help us a lot in that regard. But the traditional way that has been available to manage uncertainty is the use of confidence limits. And so we have our point estimate here, and we have formulas for the 95th percentile, for example, and we have formulas that will provide us with the point estimate and with an upper confidence limit on that 95th percentile. And, you know, I use here an 89% upper confidence limit to underscore the fact that this 89 is a choice that has no scientific background. It's arbitrary. It's been traditionally set at 95, but it could be 89 if I want to, or it could be 70, as we maybe will see a little bit later. And what happens is that if I manage to demonstrate that the 89 upper confidence limit is below the OEL, then I will be able to conclude that I am 89% sure that the true 95th percentile is below the OEL. And so 89% sure that there is no overexposure, 89% sure that there's no problem. And so we would have a statistical confidence in our conclusion if we manage to show that the upper confidence limit is below the OEL. To provide you some you know, practical idea of how wide the confidence intervals are in our field. So I made this little calculation. So it's how far is the upper confidence limit from the point estimate for the 95th percentile. And we will see the influence of 3 factors: the sample size, the level of confidence, and exposure variability. And so if we take this reference situation where we have a geometric standard deviation of 2, a sample size of 6, you know, the typical sample size recommended by AIHA, and a level of confidence of 95%, if we have the point estimate of our 95th percentile at 100, a typical upper confidence limit will be around 500. So you see that's very far, that's 5 times. So if we want to demonstrate that the 95th percentile is below the OEL, and the point estimate is 100 for this percentile, the OEL should be 5 times higher than the estimate. So it's very difficult to make this demonstration. And those of you that use IHStat have seen that, you know, you have your point estimate is maybe a half or a third of the OEL. And unfortunately, the upper confidence limit is very far and higher than the OEL, and so you cannot conclude. So you see what happens if the GSD becomes from 2 to 3, then it's not 5 times, it's 10 times higher. It's really extremely large, so it's very difficult to make any statistical demonstration here. If I increase the sample size, you see that things improve. So instead of having this width of a 5-fold, I have half of that. And you also see here in the end, compared to the reference situation, if I lower my stringency, my statistical stringency to 70%, I go down again, and I have a much thinner confidence limit, so much closer to the point estimate. But you see our typical and traditional situation would be the one in gray, so a very wide uncertainty, which renders things difficult. And to speak to that difficulty, that challenge, if we look at the possible outcomes of an analysis where you get your point estimate, and for example, IHStat provides you with your upper confidence limit for the 95th percentile. Well, you can end up in several situations. So if the upper confidence limit is lower than the OEL, you are happy because you can say, I am 95% sure, if your level of confidence was 95, I am 95% sure that there is no problem. So this is a very strong sentence. If you look at the lower confidence limit and it's higher than the OEL, then you also can make a very strong statement. You can say, I am 95% sure that there is a problem. And so these are two very strong sentences. Unfortunately, most of the time, we end up in this orange situation, this uncertain situation. So where we cannot make the statistical conclusion. So the estimate, either the estimate is lower than the OEL, but the UCL is above, or the reverse, the estimate is above the OEL, but the lower limit is above. So we are in a kind of a gray area where we cannot make any strong statement. And this orange box is the most frequent one when we are, as I write here, between 0.1 and 0.3 times the OEL. So as soon as we are not too far from the OEL, it becomes very difficult to make a very strong statistical statement because of this large uncertainty. And, very often we don't want to remain in the uncertain box. We could say, well, let's collect more sample. Maybe it will allow us to exit this orange box to go to the green or to the red, but it's not going to work every time, and sampling is costly. And so we end up in the, when we want to have a decision, so we need to say red or green, we must choose a color for this orange situation. And if we say, well, this orange situation is green, it might pose a risk to workers' health. We might fail to protect them adequately. If we put the orange boxes, we say any uncertain situation we'll consider unacceptable. Well, then we might spend money on futile prevention measures. So it's difficult to, it's really, the aim is to reduce the frequency of finding ourselves into that orange uncertain situation. And this brings me to the European approach. And the reasoning is the following. So, it started in France at INRS, a bit like the French NIOSH. They said, requesting 95% confidence that the 95th percentile is below the OEL is too stringent, because with these super long super large and wide confidence intervals or distance between the estimate and the upper confidence limit, if every time we are in the orange situation, we say it's red, it is going to cost a lot of money. We too seldom can make a strong conclusion. This stringency is too high. And it's reasonable to think that sample sizes are not going to increase dramatically in the near future, although I think they should. But you know, I haven't seen them change in the 20 years I have worked in this field. And so what was proposed as a pragmatic approach to allow us to more frequently end up with a strong statistical statement, so to be either in the green or in the red, is to lower the stringency from 95% to 70%. So you remember my illustration of the width of the distance between the point estimate and the UCL. There was a 5-fold distance when using 95% confidence, and it became like a 1.5-fold difference, so much narrower. So in this situation, we will be able to make strong statements much more often. But of course, there's a compromise, is that we accept to make more mistakes. And to provide you with a bit of a justification for accepting these mistakes, I will describe you in the next minutes the notion of how do we simulate the statistical performance of a particular interpretation scheme. So in this colorful picture, how do we assess our performant data interpretation scheme is. We can do that fairly easily with computer simulation. So the idea is that you start with a true profile, so a true situation that you invent yourself. And let's say that in this example, I created an exposure distribution that is unacceptable. That's why I have this red light here. So I created an unacceptable exposure distribution. Then I draw a sample from it. Let's say 6 measurements, for example, but it could be more, it could be less. And then I put them into my numerical blender, which will give me a compliance decision. Is it okay or not okay? For example, if the 95% upper confidence limit on the 95th percentile is below the OEL, it's green. If it is above, it's red. That might be my scheme. And so this will give me an answer for this particular sample. And what I can do, so I hope it'll be the right answer, red. But what I can do is to do that several thousands of times and see, with the random aspect of sampling, so the fact that I don't sample the entire population, but just a small part of it, just 6 values out of a lot, there will be variations. And so in the end, after simulating this procedure thousands of times, I will get an answer like the one you see here. So in that situation, the truth I had defined was red, and my strategy had provided the right answer 60% of the time. So it means a mistake rate of 40%. Someone needs to mute his microphone, I think. And so this gives us an idea of, the performance in this case. Well, we could say, is 40% of mistakes acceptable or not? And in this case, since the situation was bad, it would mean failing to protect the workers. So if we look at what I call what is called a performance curve, the idea is that we scan the entire range of possibilities for exposure situations in terms of the true exceedance. So basically, all the situations below 5% would be acceptable. You know, that's the criteria that we define for overexposure. So all the truth below 5% would be acceptable, and every situation above 5 would be unacceptable. And so a very performant strategy would need to say green light all the time in this area of the graph. You know, for all the truly acceptable situation, I should say green light always. And then right after we pass 5%, the answer should be red, okay? Because we are now in the realm of unacceptable situations. So we would need a good strategy to be as close to 0 as possible. So we would need close to 100% on the left part of the graph and close to 0 on the right part of the graph. And now you'll be disappointed when I show you the true realistic performance curve. So in orange, you still see the perfect method. And we'll look at 3 of these curves. So the first one is the red one. It corresponds to just taking one value and comparing it to half of the OEL. And if it's lower, we say green. If it's higher, we say red. So it would be, you know, something like the old NIOSH strategy or OSHA strategy. And we see that this strategy here is very close to the perfect curve on the left part. So it means that when the exposure is acceptable, you will always get a green light from this strategy. The big issue is that when you arrive in the right part, sorry, it continues to say green. So even when situations become unacceptable and even largely unacceptable, it's going to continue to provide green lights. And you know, when we and here where my you know, the red dot here is, basically it's a situation when a quarter of the exposures are above the OEL. So you know, that's 25 days out of 100, and still you have a 50% chance that this strategy will tell you it's okay. So that's why it has been criticized a lot in many scientific papers. Now, if I go to the green dashed curve here, this curve corresponds to using the traditional statistical stringency of 95%. So how we get to green or red is if the 95% upper confidence limit on the 95th percentile is below the OEL, then we say it's green. If it's not, we say it's red. So the orange, the uncertain case, is put in the red bin. So we say it's okay only if we are sure with 95% confidence that there's no problem. And you see this stringency here, you know, all the bad situations, they are almost always red lighted. You see this strategy says non-compliant almost right after our threshold of 5%. So it's very close to the perfect curve on the right. However, you see that is extremely far from the perfect curve on the left. And for example, what it means here is that with a situation where 0.5% of exposure are above the OEL, so you know, they are fairly acceptable situation, this strategy is gonna suggest that there's a problem 70% of the time. So it's almost always red lighting everything. And so this is a big problem in terms of you know, spending money where you should. And so we have these two extremes here. So this one is perfect here, but atrocious on the right. this one is perfect on the right, but atrocious on the left. And while the European compromise or the French compromise, you see that it's a between the two. So it's not too bad here, and it's not too bad here either. And you can see here that, you know, right at the threshold, there's this 30% of mistakes. That's, you know, this proposed level of confidence of 70%. So that's why people in Europe have adopted this lowering of the stringency from 95% to 70. So so this is, for those who want to have a look, the French regulation that explains their rationale, but basically you need to make this demonstration with 70% certainty that there's no problem. And this has been, the last slide on that topic is to say that this has been somewhat adopted by AIHA, because now in a series of videos that I participated to the creation of during 2021, this is an AIHA video series that is available for free. Well, you see that what we had agreed upon with my colleagues, so to have 95% certainty that there's no problem, we would say it's acceptable. That's why we strive for. But now we would say that if we can get to 70% certainty that there's no problem, we tolerate it. You know, that's already a result that we like. And then if we cannot get to being at least 70% sure that there's no problem, then we say it's a problematic situation. All right, so this is it for the 70% business. The last part of my talk, and I try to be a bit faster to not keep you too long, maybe another 15 minutes, I would say. I'll try to make it a bit shorter, is the contribution of Bayesian statistics. So Bayesian statistics in one slide, if I try to explain their essence in one slide, is, okay, you have certain quantity of interest, and let's say it's the exceedance fraction, you know, what proportion of exposures are above the OE. In a Bayesian stats, you need to say what you know in advance about that quantity. This is a requirement of Bayesian statistics. So you can say, as you can see here, you can say, I don't know anything, only that it is between 0 and 100%. But you can also say, I know a little bit. And here, you know, I say it's between 0 and 50. But it's your choice entirely to decide whether you provide information or you do not. And then, of course, your measurements say something about the situation. That's what we call the likelihood in Bayesian vocabulary. And it's going to say, for example, the data only suggests that the exceedance fraction in that population is between 14 and 34. And the Bayesian engine, the Bayesian calculation, is going to combine these two types of information, what we call your prior information and the likelihood, to provide you with a final picture of what we know now, given the prior and given the observations. And you see that when you say you know nothing in advance, the final results is very close to only what the data says. And when you say you know a little bit, well, you see here that in the end, you see the strength of that is that we get a narrower confidence interval. And this is very important because we just saw that the width of confidence intervals is a big challenge in our field. So this is potentially very powerful. And so there's two points here. So in Bayesian stats, when you say I know nothing, you're going to get very similar results to traditional stats. And the second point is that the possibility to input some information in what we call the prior is powerful, but it's a double-edged sword. Because if you say something wrong here, it's going to be translated into the final estimation. So it's a powerful but dangerous thing. Maybe I'll skip this slide because it's just saying what the previous slide did in a slightly more complicated way. So you define your prior in the shape of an uncertainty distribution, and then it's mixed with the likelihood that measures, how likely are the observations for each potential value of your parameters across what you define in the prior, and then you get what we call the posterior distribution. So what we know about the parameter of interest after the Bayesian model combined the prior and the data. And to go back to this slide when we said, what does my sample tells me about the actual exposure distribution in the population? And I think this is where Bayesian statistics are very interesting, is that Bayesian statistics actually provide you a portrait of the possibilities. So here you see an example where using XPOStats, the tools we developed at U of M, I generated from that single sample of 6 lead measurements, 1,000 plausible true distributions that are suggested by these measurements. So we get much more than just a confidence limit. We get really the entire universe of plausible distributions. And what we can do with that is, I think, very interesting, is we can, because let's say we have our 1,000 plausible exposure distributions, for each of these, we can calculate their corresponding 95th percentile, the metric that is of interest to us. And so what we get from Bayesian analysis is we get 1,000 plausible values for this percentile. And so we can draw a histogram or a density curve that reflects what we know about this quantity. So we get the entire uncertainty distribution. And so keep in mind here that we are looking at plausible values for the 95th percentile, not the exposure distribution. Really, it's a distribution that reflects what we know about the 95th percentile. So, and this is very powerful. And we can use it to make the traditional interpretation. So this is what we know about the 95th percentile. The center of the distribution would be our point estimate. And then we could add, for example, a 70% upper confidence limit and a 95% upper confidence limit. And just use them as we used confidence limit previously. So we could do the same thing and have our green boxes and red boxes and orange boxes. But what we can do, and is very important, is that we can also do this. So we can say out of the 1,000 plausible values for the 95th percentile, in this case, 76% are above the OEL. And what it means is basically, it means that there's a 76% chance that the true value is above the OEL. So basically, it gives me the probability of overexposure. Given my data, the probability that I have a problem is 76%. And I think this is a more useful message than the UCL and UTLs and stuff like that. That's very difficult to convey. And that's what we do in XPOStats. In XPOStats, you state what you define as overexposure, Here, the 95th% over the OEL is what I define as overexposure. And then XPOSTAT is going to provide you, given your data, the probability that there is indeed overexposure is this percentage. And then we can find, again, the three colors suggested in the AIHA scheme that I showed you earlier. If we can say that there is less than 5% chance of a problem, we say it's fine, it's what we strive for. We want to show that there's a less than 5% chance that there's a problem. We tolerate when this chance of a problem is smaller than 30. It's the logical opposite of 70% sure that there is no problem. And if it's greater than 30, then we say it's problematic. We need to implement controls. So that's how XPOSTAT works. And of course, if you can split the uncertainty distribution in two parts, the probability above the OEL, the probability below, you can split the uncertainty distribution in a more complex ways. And basically, in essence, you can split it using the AIHA exposure control categories. And this is how you can calculate the probabilities associated with each of the categories that you might know of, the risk bands I call, or the exposure control categories. So given your data, here's what your situation looks like. And here the most probable would be a category 4, but then you have the distribution of probabilities across all the others. So you see, Bayesian statistics allow you full access to the uncertainty distribution, and you can interpret it by splitting it into problem, no problem, or in a more complex way into the various categories of the AIHA. And of course, in XPOSTAT, you can switch between the three types of interpretation: traditional, using confidence limit, the probability of a problem, and then the probabilities of the XPOSTAT categories. And I'll just skip this quickly. You can now find XPOSTAT in the webpage of the AIHA risk assessment tools. So this is quite an endorsement, and we are very happy of that. You can, if you are a bit patient and you like your good old IHStat, we are currently finishing up a Bayesian version of IHStat that will end up on the AIHA website too. And basically, it's the old IHStat user interface, but we replaced the engine with a much more powerful engine. And you can notice here the non-detects have ceased to be a problem in IHStat thanks to the Bayesian engine from XPOSTAT. And I think I'll go just this last slide. That's a comparison between Bayesian statistics and frequentist statistics, traditional statistics. I think we should realize a number of facts about them, because Bayesian stats are not so far away from traditional stats. So both use the same distributional assumptions. They both need a random sample from the target population. Both can be used to derive confidence limits. And both will lead to similar results when you don't put a lot of information in your prior. But Bayesian permits prior information if you want. Bayesian handles censored data much better. Indeed, the best way it can be handled. And also Bayesian allows to communicate risk for me in a more intuitive way with the use of the chances that you have a problem. I think it's very powerful. And the last but is that you need a tool. You cannot really do it by hand. And this is it. Apologies for keeping you longer than I should have. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Jérôme. In fact, it's longer, but for sure it's not a simple topics neither. So we had the question in the chat from Rebecca Elbourne, which says, are there tests that you can do to determine whether your similar exposure group is properly defined, which means are some members more likely to have results in upper range?
Thanks for that question, Rebecca. So if you don't have a lot of data, it's stated in the European guideline, CEN 689, that if your GSD, your group GSD, you put all your data in the computer and gives you a GSD above 3, maybe you should check. It's not a very firm threshold between good SEG, bad SEG. It's just a recommendation to have a second look because maybe you put things together that shouldn't be. If you want to go deeper than that, and there's actually the Dutch and British guideline published in 2010 is exactly about that. You can do what we call an ANOVA analysis if you have repeats on some workers in your group, and you can actually exactly estimate whether some workers are left behind in this group assessment. And the calculations are a bit more involved, and you need to have repeats on some workers, but you can make these calculations in Expostats 2. It would be Expostats 2 too. We're interested to try.
Thank you. So I think maybe we have time for a last small question, quick question, if there are. So you said that the modernization of the IHSAT will be available this fall, 2022.
Yeah. Actually, it was ready. I worked with Daniel Drolet, our magician for Excel, and it was ready in January. But we encountered the classical, it doesn't work on my machine problem. And so I had to hire a Microsoft Office specialist to work on compatibility and installation issues. And that's why it took some time, but I think we are going to deliver the program to AIHA by the end of June. And we will maybe test it during the summer and then release it early fall. And if any of you would be interested in being a part of the beta test, please drop me an email. I'll be happy to send you the installation files and include you in that test.
Good. Maybe you could put your email in the chat box, so
yeah.
you're going to be able to receive some. So I think we'll end it here. Is Sarah want to say something as our new past president status?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the presentation. I'm sure you guys will have some people reach out to you, and it'll be great to get that tool out. So thanks again for coming, and thanks for everybody joining us. I don't have any last words. So
Don't forget to complete the survey that you will receive. It helps us to improve ourselves AGM to AGM. So, and again, thank you all to assist to the AGM this year, and hope to see you next year again. And if some of you want to join us in any committee, we always seek for new volunteer as well.
yeah, and there'll be an opportunity to sign up or leave your email in the post survey as well. So
it's true. So thank you all. Thanks again, Jérôme. It was really interesting as
Thank you,
always.
Eugenia, for having me. I was very happy to come here.
Had a good evening, everyone's. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.